Wobbly Wildcard, you are a weird old Dragons fan, and
Guilty as charged.
My defense is like I don't actually support an NRL team. I play the role of the Warriors fan in writing and talking about the Warriors, but I don't, specifically support one NRL team. I just sit back and enjoy it. So that's my defense with the Warriors. But considering I do cover the Warriors quite extensively, this is the Niche Cast Derby. Warriors versus Dragons. First game back, round 3. So we're going to talk about this game. Wildcard might share some weird, odd, funky opinions about the Dragons. And then we'll go through the rest of the NRL and touch on those Kiwi NRL matchups. Speaking of Kiwi NRL, the Dragons are one of the shittiest clubs with regards to Kiwi NRL talent. I think the Rabbitohs are only the worst ones. They named Bryson Goodwin and Tom Amoni on their extended bench. No Kiwi NRL players in their top 17. And then you go to the Dragons, and they only have Jordan Pereira, who is from Wellington. I think he went to Upper Hutt or Lower Hutt College in Wellington. He's on the wing for the Dragons. No Isaac Luke. He's been dropped. So just from a Dragons perspective here, Wildcard, I actually quite like Jordan Pereira. He's lively, he's powerful, good footwork, but a size out the back with Mikaele Ravalawa as well. How do you view the Isaac Luke situation at the Dragons? The Dragons lost both of their first 2 games, I believe, and I think off the top of my head, I checked the stats this morning, Isaac Luke had a really good first game maybe, and then second game, less running, more missed tackles, and he's not even in the top 21 for the Dragons. They've gone with Cameron McInnes at hooker and no real hooker cover elsewhere, so Cameron McInnes can play 80 minutes. So how do you view the Isaac Luke situation, the Cameron McInnes situation, just fitting those pieces of the puzzle together for your Dragons with the Kiwi NRL goggles on?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know what to think of it exactly, because I did a quick little Twitter search and stuff to have a check when I saw the team list and whatever. No one seemed to have a point to make on the thing, just that Isaac Luke wasn't in the squad. And I don't know if that's quarantine related or whatever. I don't know if he came back to New Zealand for the thing and maybe is just a little a week or 2 behind everyone else because he would have had to do his thing when he got back. I don't know. Maybe he stayed in Aussie the whole time. I can't say. I basically checked out on the NRL entirely before they went into the hiatus and stuff like that. I actually can't hardly remember anything from those first 2 weeks, and to be honest, I don't think those first 2 weeks should count, but so it goes. So yeah, I mean, Cam McInnes is always going to be the number 1 hooker. Isaac Luke was there to be a dude off the bench, so maybe just some certain matchups they don't think they need that, or maybe he's just not quite at the fitness yet. He's still working his way back after the long break. I'm not thinking too deeply on the matter, but I would suggest it's probably something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, he's there to be a veteran sort of role player presence. He's not there to be an 80-minute dude or anything like that. So it's not it's not the most major one, but it's a little bit disappointing because he doesn't get to play against his old team, and also because he's a player I really enjoy playing and have been looking forward to watching playing for my team that I support as well.
Yeah, sure. With Isaac Luke's actually got a lot of airplay on the Niche Cast. We talk a bit about Isaac Luke just as one of the most maybe not quite underrated, but not I don't know. He's definitely better than Wade Egan and Carl Lawton, and he's quite a good player. I just think he does a lot of stuff at hooker that other players don't do. So it's always a bummer when he doesn't play. As for the Warriors, wowee. I don't really know where to start for the Warriors. In terms of just straight up selection, Jared Beale's just coming straight back in. He starts at centre. Obviously, David Fusitu'a is still in probably quarantine in Australia, so he's not available. So that opens the spot for Beale to come in at centre, and then you still have Patrick Herbert, suddenly a winger for the Warriors now, as part of Stephen Kearney's Fusitu'a at centre switch that didn't look to actually result in anything positive in those first 2 games. To be honest, Fusitu'a looked a bit slow, and he was one of the prime examples of me questioning the training stuff, because he just looked like his feet were stuck in concrete in those first 2 games. And then getting into that forward pack, Jermaine Tanoa-Brown is named to start, and then Isaiah Papali'i starting on an edge, and I don't know what the fuck is going on there. Like, Iliasa Katoa was the best player for the Warriors in their 2 games. His first 2 games of NRL football, he was the best player for the whole Warriors team. And I think the combination of having Katoa on one edge, is very big, powerful, nimble, and Tohu Harris on the other edge. Like, Katoa and Harris are quite similar. I think Harris has better footwork and better skill, but having Katoa on one edge and Harris on the other edge is far more dynamic than Papali'i. I think Papali'i has to be a middle forward because he doesn't really offer anything else. He's not quick, he's not nimble-footed, he doesn't have a whole lot of skill, but if you chuck him in the middle, he does work hard and he is going to show up in every play. So I am interested in that move, although it comes with the caveat, the asterisk of Stephen Kearney being incredibly weird with his selections. Like, Stephen Kearney is going to make some last minute changes for sure. He always does. And I don't know what he's up to. Like, Katoa in those first few games, he played a couple minutes on the edge, couple minutes in the middle, and he's just moving all over the show. It's like Stephen Kearney's trying to be super cute and tricky with his rotations and selections. So I don't know if we're actually going to see Isaiah Papali'i play 80 minutes on an edge. But I am not opposed to Katoa through the middle, considering how lackluster the Warriors have been in their forward pack as well. So how do you view like the Katoa Papali'i selections there from Stephen Kearney, which I don't think actually really matters come game time, because Stephen Kearney is going to do some weird shit anyway.
Kearney's sort of like, I don't know if it's that he's got a license to just be a bit of a weirdo with his selections, or maybe it's more like he feels he has to because he doesn't quite have like the raw players there in certain positions. I mean, we talked a couple podcasts ago about how the Warriors have tried to make a bit of an effort of trying to bring in like bigger, more mobile forwards to the team in their sort of in their future transfer kind of stuff, largely because maybe they just don't quite have that that kind of player in the team at the moment. And I mean, you ask how I view the situation. I view the situation from the point of view of someone who's hoping this team gets beaten by 50 points, and who's looking at who's sitting here listening to you talk about how there might be some confusion about edge forwards and such, and I'm thinking, well, Tyson Frizzell and Tarek Sims are extremely talented edge forwards, both with great strength. Sims is a big bugger. He's a tall fella. Frizzell less so, but he's real quick as well. Knows how to run into a gap. Like, these are the kind of players who, well, I mean, if the Warriors are going to be a little bit like mix and match in those situations, these are the kind of players who know how to take advantage of that, because that is quite honestly like the strength of the Dragons team is their forward pack, and specifically like their back row with Frizzell, Sims, James Graham's named at 13 as well, so like good for him. I'm a little bit confused about that, but whatever. Just because the prop rotation is a little weird. Like, Trent Merrin is named 18th man at the moment. I guess maybe there's some fitness stuff with him as well coming back. I have absolutely no idea how these things will work. I actually can't even remember how things worked in the first couple games. Like, it's just gone from my memory. So, but like the Dragons team, most of their backline, they've got two good halves who don't really have a combination yet, because Gareth Widdop was mostly playing in the half, or if he wasn't playing in the half, there was some time where Widdop played fullback. Last season, well, these like Norman and Hunt were sort of designating to Widdop, who was running the show, even if he was playing further back. Like, it was kind of an unusual situation there. So these two don't really have a massive combo, but two quality players, two guys who've been there, done that before. The rest of their back line is quite inexperienced, but the forward pack is where the strength is. So it's kind of a funny thing, because I think it's the opposite balance with the Warriors, where the forward pack is where they've had a few issues over the last year or two, and the back line, I mean, you've got a Dally M winner at fullback, which is where you start with this Warriors team. But the back line tends to be a little more they got more experience. They got guys who at least they know what they're going to get from them a bit more. It's a funny little balance. It's one of those things like when you get a team that's very good in attack against a team that's not so good on defense but is better on attack and not good on, you get those sort of opposite things clashing. It should be an interesting kind of matchup for that reason, I think.
I did forget to mention Cody Nikorima named to start in the halves alongside Blake Green, which bumps Chanel Harris-Tavita out of the 17. Previously, Nikorima came off the bench. So you had Chanel Harris-Tavita and Blake Green in the halves, and you had Wade Egan starting a hooker, and then you had Cody Nikorima coming off the bench as the hooker. I mean, this is kind of the state of the Warriors, where you've got a senior halfback in Blake Green who is absolutely crap. I like Blake Green. I'm positive about what Blake Green could offer the Warriors, but his 2 games in 2020 were absolute trash. And then you've got a senior halfback.
And 2019 wasn't great either for him.
Yeah, so you've got a senior halfback who's not playing his best footy and is playing below average footy, and then you're trying different combinations for his halves partner. So you've got an unestablished NRL half in Chanel Harris-Tavita, and then you've got another NRL half in Cody Nikorima, and no one knows his best position. So it's not just about trying to put 3 people into 2 positions. You got to suss out the context around those 3 people. Blake Green's got issues. Is Cody Nikorima a half? Who knows? Chanel Harris-Tavita didn't really take his opportunity in those first 2 games. So it's a bit of a conundrum in the halves, but it is an opportunity, Blake Green and Cody Nikorima, to at least lay some foundations of positive footy to just settle into having a combination halves. If you, at least with Sean Johnson and Blake Green, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck at fullback, and maybe Isaac Lukadami half, at least when you had that period where those 4 players were playing week in, week out, there's a chance to, game 1 might not be so good, but you build combinations, you have chemistry, you have instincts and intuition, which I think is the most underrated thing in sports, is how you combine with your teammates and establishing those connections. The Warriors have none of that. They've got one guy who's always going to be fullback, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, but there's as far as executing plays, his combination with Blake Green is very stagnant, and then you've got a new hooker, and you've got Nikorima playing in the halves for the first time this year. It's very messy and just all over the show, and it doesn't fill me with confidence, but it also is a little window of opportunity for I'll stretch it out to these 4 lads to lay down some concrete foundations of the spine for the Warriors, because as long as the Warriors don't have a spine that is set in stone, they're going to be shit. You're going to have different players coming in and out. You're going to, that's no recipe for success in the NRL. All the best NRL teams have combinations. They've got chemistry, and they know the operations of their spine players, and there's confidence. The Warriors have none of those things. So it's a double-edged sword. It's it's shit, but it's also a little window for opportunity.
And there's also another couple ways in which that thing about the Warriors and Dragons being equal and opposite in different areas is true too, because the Warriors are trying to figure out who their halves combination ought to be, and the Dragons, that's one of the few areas where they don't have any drama this year because there's only 2 guys competing for the role. The Warriors know exactly who their fullback is. The Dragons don't have a clue. They tried Lomax. They've tried last year, Norman and Widdop were playing there. Dufty got a lot of games at the start. Dufty's back now. He was dropped for the first game. He might have played off the bench, or I can't remember, but he might have started the second game. He did start the second game actually, because that's my one major memory from those 2 weeks was Dufty getting a runaway intercept try against Penrith. It would have been. So, and then also I would suggest the Warriors. David Fusitu'a is not available, but the Warriors know who their wingers are, and they've got two very successful, reliable wingers. The Dragons also don't really have a clue there, because whoever plays on the wing depends on who plays at fullback, depends on who's in centres, and Zach Lomax has played on the wing, I think, at some point. He's in the centres now, which is probably his best position. He's also played at fullback at times. It's a bit of a... Yeah, there's the areas where one team is messy, the other team seems to know what they're doing. And, this is it's hard to know what to expect, because, the disrupted nature of the NRL so far means that you can probably forgive any team for having, let's say, an error-riddled kind of performance this week. We're not really expecting superstar perfect footy, but also both these teams had a lot of errors in their first 2 weeks, and I think the Dragons are better than they've shown, but they're 0-2, and if you make a lot of mistakes, you lose a lot of games. You can't be your own worst enemy and still expect to win NRL games. It's that's not how it works. And that probably means, there's 2 weeks in, 2 losses is nothing. It's easy to overcome. Both these teams are also only 1 win out of the top 8, but there's a lot on the line at the same time, because it is a contracted season, and you don't want to be coming out and starting negatively and then falling back into habits that are gonna, if you take too long to get out of those habits, your season's gone. So yeah, it's a sneaky one. And the Warriors for a long time there just used to, I think they at one point lost 18 games in a row or something like that to the Dragons. It was just one of my the guaranteed wins of the season for the Dragons was whenever they happened to play the Warriors. But the last couple years, the Warriors have been a lot better. In fact, I think pretty sure they beat the Dragons last year, I forget, but they have played better against this team more recently. So there's a lot of areas to think of, sort of ponder on matchups here. It's one of those kind of gifts of a clash like that, but it's also just bloody impossible to try. Do you have a feel on what expectations? Are you thinking one team's big favorite here or whatever, or are you thinking it's just one of those who the hell knows kind of games?
Obviously the Warriors, there's no way you can say the Warriors will win this game. That's insane. But there's also something about the Dragons. There's just a feeling that they're not. Coming off this Michael Jordan documentary, I've had a lot of thoughts about winning and how we assess players. And there's real players who help their team win, and then there's good players who are good players who simply cannot be associated with winning, and then simply cannot be put in the same class as some of the other best players in that sport. Some of these Dragons players are really good players, but do they, as a group, do the individuals help the team win? And that's just the vibe I get from the Dragons, is they should win and they should be good, but they're not. And you just think about well, where's the culture elements and stylistic elements and just what you're up to playing footy. So on the one hand, you got the Dragons who should be good, and then you've got the Warriors who are just a very strange football organization at this time. One little snippet of Warriors weirdness, again, thanks to Stephen Kearney in the most part, is King Vuniyayawa on the bench. Now, King Vuniyayawa, I think last season he was playing local footy in Auckland. He's a Manurewa Marlins junior, so he's from South Auckland, so definitely big it up to King Vuniyayawa. And I like his aggression. I like his just straight up oomph through the middle. But King Vuniyayawa, only 3 players for the Warriors had 3 or more errors. Now this points to another issue to the Warriors. King Vuniyayawa had 3 errors in 2 games. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck had 3 errors in 2 games. Adam Blair had 4 errors in 2 games. The issue for King Vuniyayawa is he only played 43 minutes. So, of all the Warriors who made an error, as per Fox Sports, their stats lab, a bunch of Warriors players had it registered an error, but they all played more than 79 minutes. King Vuniyayawa's minute-to-error ratio was terrible. And on top of that, you've now got King Vuniyayawa with Josh Curran and Jack Murchie on the extended bench. Josh Curran and Jack Murchie are they're forwards in the sense that they can play edge or middle. I think as the Warriors move forward and establish Torres and Elias Toa, Josh Curran and Jack Murchie are as more middle forwards. So King Vuniyayawa is essentially playing to keep his spot on the Warriors bench. He's got to offer something because he had a couple of untimely errors in those 2 games. But take this a little bit further, Wildcard, and I mentioned 2 senior players with the most errors at the Warriors, Adam Blair and Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. Jump to missed tackles. You've got Adam Blair leading all missed tackles. So a terrible start for Adam Blair. Leads the missed tackles and errors for the Warriors. Wade Egan is second in missed tackles. So Wade Egan coming to a new club, showing that he can't defend. And there's also a lack of dummy half running. So there's a couple of aspects of the Warriors play that I might highlight after this. Wade Egan's second in missed tackles. The leading missed tacklers, though, Adam Blair, Wade Egan, Blake Green, Dave Fusatua, Tohu Harris. All those dudes like Blair, Green, Fusatua, Harris, they're all established NRL players, and them mixed in with Roger Tuivasa-Sheck and Adam Blair leading the errors. Maybe let's check penalties conceded. Chanel Harris-Tavita, unlucky. No real issues there. So, that's just a little idea of, like, it's a tough gig for the Warriors if their most experienced players aren't setting the right tone. And that's exactly what happened in those first 2 games. Like, it's one thing for King Vuniyayawa, who is playing his first 2 NRL games of his life, to have a couple of errors. Like, okay, bro, like, all good. Just keep trying to adjust to NRL footy, keep making moves, and just run hard. But when you've got your senior players leading the way with missed tackles and errors, that seeps into the fabric of your team. So it's not surprising that other players follow suit, because if your leaders are doing that, it's going to flow on to elsewhere. I'll just finish this bit wildcard about the Warriors' stylistic elements. Like, their first 2 games, they didn't register a line break. They didn't score a try. Everyone associates the Warriors with, funky footy. They were 14th in offloads, so they don't really offload the football. They don't really run out of dummy half either. They're 14th in dummy half runs as per NRL.com. So, if the Warriors want to be better, get a bit more zip out of dummy half, and that's not just Wade Egan, that's getting Roger Tuivasa-Sheck into dummy half, getting Patrick Herbert into dummy half, ensuring that your outside backs do a lot of dummy half running to play hard and fast through the middle and then spread it wide, a bit more space, and so on and so forth. If the Warriors want to score some points, they might have to offload the footy, and they might just have to, I can't stress enough how mediocre the Warriors were in those first 2 games. And remember, we're coming from a history where the Warriors tend to be crap more often than they are good. And this was one of the most depressing 2-week stretches of Warriors footy that I have ever experienced. That's where the Warriors are entering the 2020 NRL restart from. And it's pretty crazy when you think about how, where this club is at right now, deep into the Stephen Kearney era. Things should be looking up. Things like they've made a lot of really positive moves, and I'm optimistic, but they it's not just that their backs are against the wall from like external pressure. They have delivered absolutely nothing in 2020, and we're going to see what this Warriors team and what the Warriors club is made of, because if they can't rally from the situation that they find themselves in, being in Australia and having to go through all the shit they had to go through, if they can't rally and spice things up, it's not just for starters, that is incredibly depressing for the 2020 season, but it doesn't reflect well on anyone at the club. It doesn't reflect well on the coach. It doesn't reflect well on the CEO. It doesn't reflect well on the skipper, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, who I love. And it's going to be a tough 6 months for the Warriors. So that just kind of sets the scene for the Warriors coming into this game against the Dragons.